A conference was held here in Singapore today to discuss how cities tackle climate change. It was hosted by the Danish embassy ahead of next month's C40 World Mayors Summit in Copenhagen. Now, that summit will bring together leading cities, businesses and citizens to rally around the ambitious action that the world needs to take.
And joining us in studio is Denmark's ambassador to Singapore, Ms. Dorte Vizard, to talk about developing strong partnerships towards more sustainable cities. Thank you so much for coming in. Firstly, how did Singapore sort of fit into this, being that it is, it is a country, but it is also a city?
Well, Singapore was included in the C40 network back in 2012 in recognition of all the efforts Singapore is doing to innovate as a city and as a green city. So Singapore could not really join on normal terms, but has been invited to join the club because we want inspiration from Singapore.
Yeah. So you had your session today. How did that go? In terms of the consensus as to how to take things forward with tackling climate change?
There was a consensus that it's important to set a high level of ambition and that the government has a role in setting this direction and level of ambition, but that cities are important actors to drive change, and you need cities because they are the closest to the citizens and they are the ones who can engage with academia and businesses on developing those innovative solutions that we need.
And what are some of these innovative solutions that you have in mind?
Well, some of the solutions, for instance, that we will showcase in Copenhagen during the summit next month is our waste-to-energy plant called Copenhagen. Copenhagen is a result of public-private co-creation, you can say, where we're not just solving a practical problem, but we're trying to make a more livable solution for the citizens as well. So Copenhagen is actually a waste-to-energy plant. It's placed just a stone's throw away from the Queen's Palace. She can see it out of her bedroom windows, probably. And nevertheless, it provides power, district heating to most of the central city. But it's been created in such a way that it's beautiful architecture. And on top of it, there's a ski slope that the citizens can enjoy. So you've taken something that's very practical and you made it a livable function for the citizens. And that's one of the solutions we will show.
And what sort of waste is that?
It's rubbish from household that's collected and then incinerated in a very efficient manner, and then the heat is driven into our district heating system.
Ambassador, you spoke just now about the issue of the role of governments and that cities specifically can play a very important role. It is such a big issue to tackle, though often governments are involved in this process. So when it comes to public-private collaborations, what's the way forward in terms of what they can do? How much can they achieve?
We can only achieve anything if we work together. We really have to muster up all the ideas and innovation that we can find. So it requires both top-down and bottom-up approaches. And that's what we're trying to do in Denmark. In Singapore, you're probably most known for the bottom-down approaches. But more and more, I think we will see citizens become actively involved in designing the society here.
And what do you see sort of the areas of collaboration then?
Some of the areas of collaboration that we are looking at is how we can source ideas and solutions from one another to build our cities. We have, for instance, a project between Singapore and Denmark called Access Cities. It's a public-private partnership funded by Danish industry partners. And they are helping Singapore government agencies and companies on devising up challenge statements so they can source tech and solutions from Nordic companies. So the idea is bring them here based on a challenge statement that is defined by the agencies themselves.
So climate change is an issue here in Singapore, which we've been discussing a great deal. Our Prime Minister laid out his thoughts about it for the next, in terms of how do we tackle rising sea levels, for example. What's the hallmark of how Denmark has tackled this problem?
Well, there's no doubt that climate change has risen to the very top of the political agenda in both Singapore and Denmark. It was impressive to see Prime Minister Lee dedicate around 20 minutes of his National Day rally speech to climate change and calling it an existential problem for Singapore. Likewise, in Denmark, where we have just had elections, the debate up to the elections were very intense on debate, very vigorous debate on energy policy, on climate change. And it has led the government now, after it changed to a new party, to set a very ambitious target for our climate change efforts. In fact, the goal in Denmark will be to reduce our CO2 emissions by 70% in 2030, according to the 1990 levels. And that's an enormous increase in ambition from the 40% we had previously. And I have to be honest and say that that's really a moonshot. We don't really know how to do it yet. But sometimes you need that kind of moonshot to really drive innovation. And we know that if we are to deliver on the Paris Agreement's goals of reducing climate change by less than 2% centigrade, or less than 2 centigrade, then we need new ideas that don't exist yet. So this is the only way to drive that.
Now, there are significant challenges ahead. We've seen recently the fires in Brazil and a reluctance to sort of address those by the president there. We've seen the US also step away from the Paris Climate Accord. How do you see this sort of getting back on track to be in line with what Singapore's doing, what Denmark's doing, to sort of focus on the bigger picture, if you like?
Climate change is extremely complex and is also a very national political issue, so we have to respect that countries have their own opinion about how to deal with it. But our goal is to raise the international ambition and to stick to the Paris Accord and to try and deliver on the goals we have agreed there. Therefore, we also support the UN Secretary General in the meeting he's called for in September, just the end of this month, his climate summit, where he will try and raise ambition level, because we're not yet on track to meet the Paris Agreement, and we want to get there.
All right, well, we wish you all the best for all of our sakes, really, with this endeavour. We were speaking with Dorte Vizard, Denmark's ambassador to Singapore.